Autumn 1943, Camp Landing, Florida. A German soldier, fresh from the harsh deserts of North Africa, stared in awe at a bottle of Pepsi-Cola. The brown liquid fizzed inside the bottle, something he had never seen before. After 2 years of fighting, surviving on dry biscuits and ersatz coffee, this sweet carbonated drink was a miracle. What seemed like a simple treat costing just 5 cents symbolized everything that Nazi propaganda had denied about America. Here, prisoners would discover a reality that shattered their preconceived notions and changed their understanding of the world. As the war raged on, German soldiers captured in North Africa during the surrender of Tunisia in June 1943 were brought to American prison camps. These men who had been led to believe that America was weak and decadent soon found themselves face to face with an entirely different reality. In the prison camps, they were introduced to something that would change their worldview. Abundance, the American way of life, a nation where ice cream was a regular dessert, where soft drinks were as common as water, and candy bars were given out like nothing more than a small gift. These simple pleasures, foods most Germans had never tasted, would have a more powerful impact than any wartime propaganda could. Pepsi-Cola, ice cream, and candy bars became symbols of the vast difference between the deprivations of Nazi Germany and the limitless resources of the United States. The Desert's end in 1943 brought approximately 280,000 German and Italian soldiers into Allied captivity. These soldiers had expected to face starvation as Nazi propaganda had prepared them for the brutal treatment they believed awaited them. Instead, they encountered American field rations, crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, and coffee. In just a few hours, the men were receiving more food than they'd seen in months. Some prisoners even enjoyed pancakes, syrup, eggs, and milk, foods that had long disappeared from their own military rations. But it didn't stop there. The Victory ships, which transported prisoners across the Atlantic, provided an education in American abundance. The ships, mass-produced at an unprecedented rate, carried up to 35,000 prisoners per month, and their rations were comparable to what American servicemen received. Daily meals included fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and even ice cream. German prisoners, many of whom had not seen ice cream since before the war, were amazed when it was served to them during the voyage. Upon arrival in American ports like Baltimore and Boston, the prisoners saw in America that Nazi propaganda had labeled impossible. Military procurement record from 1943 showed shelves stocked with candy bars from major manufacturers like Hershey, Mars, and Nestle available to anyone for just 5 cents, the same price as in the American stores. The prisoners witnessed how ordinary citizens lived, how even small towns had regular deliveries of soft drinks and sweets. As they traveled inland by train, the prisoners were further exposed to America's abundance. Unlike the cramped cattle cars they had traveled in across Europe, the German prisoners were placed in passenger coaches with full meals served on dining cars. They learned that this wasn't some special treatment, but the standard of American service. The conditions in the prison camps were equally surprising. Many camps exceeded the requirements set out by the Geneva Convention, offering prisoners hot showers, flush toilets, and heated barracks. But the most surprising element was the PX stores where prisoners could purchase Pepsi-Cola, Dr. Pepper, root beer, ice cream, and even alcohol, all at incredibly low prices. Prisoners, earning up to $1 per day, could buy 20 Pepsi-Colas with a single day's wages. Pepsi-Cola, a drink that had never been available to most prisoners before, became a symbol of American industrial might. In 1943, the Pepsi-Cola company produced 6 billion bottles, an extraordinary feat of logistics. These drinks were delivered to camps regularly, creating a standardization and consistency that amazed the prisoners. Ice cream was another surprise for the German prisoners who hadn't tasted it since before the war. Seeing it served casually in the camps was an unimaginable luxury. In some camps, ice cream was even made fresh on site for events like the 4th of July, creating an atmosphere of celebration and comfort. Perhaps the most profound effect of this abundance came with sugar. In Germany, sugar was strictly rationed, with civilians receiving just 300 grams per month. In American camps, sugar sat in large bowls on the mess hall tables, available for unlimited use. Soldiers ate cakes, cookies, and pies regularly, and sweetened their coffee and tea without any hesitation. The wastefulness of sugar, when a supply was accidentally hardened due to humidity, left German prisoners stunned. The fact that it was discarded rather than salvaged highlighted a world of abundance they could not comprehend. By 1944, when many German prisoners began working in agriculture and food production across the United States, they witnessed firsthand the scale of American production. In Wisconsin, they picked cherries for maraschino production fruit that would top ice cream sundaes. In Nevada and Kansas, they saw sugar beets being processed in a way that far surpassed German agricultural methods. It was clear to them that American production was so vast it could support luxuries like chocolate, Pepsi-Cola, and ice cream, even in wartime. By 1945, when the war was nearing its end, the German prisoners were sent back to a defeated and devastated Germany. They returned home heavier, healthier, and with an understanding of the abundance they had witnessed in American prison camps. They brought with them stories of Pepsi-Cola, ice cream, and a society where scarcity was unknown. While their families faced starvation, the transformation these men underwent wasn't just physical. It was ideological. They had learned that American strength wasn't rooted in military might, but in the power of production, abundance, and generosity. The simple act of sharing ice cream and Pepsi-Cola with enemies in American prison camps had done more to break the Nazi ideology than any military victory ever could. The impact of this abundance shaped the post-war reconstruction of Germany, particularly the economic miracle of the 1950s. Former prisoners of war who had witnessed firsthand the power of American industry and democracy became advocates for a future built on production, not conquest. And as these men spread the story of their experiences, the legend of American prosperity and the victory of democracy was cemented in the hearts and minds of a new generation. The transformation began with simple observations that challenged everything these soldiers had been taught about their enemies. In Camp Landing, prisoners watched American guards share their own rations when supplies ran late. They witnessed kitchen staff preparing meals with care and attention that contradicted propaganda about American callousness. The abundance wasn't just material, it was cultural. Americans seemed genuinely puzzled by the concept of scarcity. When prisoners asked about rationing, guards explained that while some items were limited for the war effort, basic necessities remained available to all citizens. This concept was revolutionary to men from a nation where bread lines had become normal and ersatz coffee was a luxury. The psychological impact of witnessing unlimited sugar bowls cannot be overstated. For soldiers who had watched civilians fight over potato peels in German cities, seeing sugar freely discarded when it hardened represented a fundamental shift in understanding. America wasn't just wealthy, it operated under completely different assumptions about resource availability and human worth. The work details across America provided the most convincing evidence of industrial capacity. In Wisconsin cherry orchards, prisoners picked fruit destined for ice cream toppings while observing mechanized farming that dwarfed German methods. The cherry harvest alone produced enough maraschino cherries to supply every soda fountain in America, a luxury industry that continued operating during total war. In Nevada and Kansas sugar beet fields, prisoners witnessed agricultural production scales that seemed impossible. Single farms processed more sugar beets than entire German districts, using machinery and techniques that demonstrated technological superiority beyond propaganda claims. The prisoners learned that American agricultural abundance wasn't accidental but systematic, built on industrial farming methods, efficient distribution networks, and economic systems that prioritize production over ideology. Factory visits revealed assembly lines producing Pepsi-Cola at rates exceeding entire German beverage industries. The 6 billion bottles manufactured annually represented more than logistics. It demonstrated a society that could maintain luxury production during wartime while feeding both civilians and military forces. The ideological transformation accelerated as prisoners gained weight and health while their families starved in bombed German cities. Letters from home described desperate conditions, bread made from sawdust, children begging for scraps, while the same men enjoyed fresh meat and vegetables daily in American camps. This contrast created cognitive dissonance that shattered Nazi teachings about racial superiority and national destiny. Prisoners began questioning fundamental assumptions about German strength and American weakness. If America could feed its enemies better than Germany fed its own people, what did this reveal about the two systems? The abundance wasn't temporary wartime luck, but systematic national capacity built on democratic institutions and industrial efficiency. Medical examinations showed prisoners gaining 15 to 20 pounds during captivity, developing muscle mass from adequate nutrition, and recovering from chronic deficiencies that had plagued them throughout military service. American doctors treated German prisoners with the same care given to Allied personnel, another contradiction of propaganda about American brutality and racial hatred that had justified the war. The repatriation process in 1945 revealed the full scope of transformation these men had undergone. Boarding victory ships for the return journey, prisoners carried more than personal belongings. They carried memories of abundance that would reshape post-war Germany. The contrast became stark upon arrival in Hamburg and Bremen, where bomb damage and starvation created landscapes of devastation that seemed impossible after experiencing American prosperity. Former prisoners distributed chocolate bars and canned goods saved from their final American meals to desperate German civilians, small gestures that demonstrated the abundance gap between nations. These men had witnessed a society where throwing away hardened sugar was normal while their countrymen died for potato peels. The stories they told family members and neighbors spread rapidly through defeated communities, creating new understanding about American capacity and German delusions. Children who had never tasted chocolate received American candy bars from returning fathers, physical proof of abundance that contradicted years of Reich propaganda about enemy weakness and German superiority in all matters of national strength and industrial production. The influence of returned prisoners on German Reconstruction proved more significant than military occupation policies. Former prisoners became advocates for American-style democratic institutions and market economics, understanding that abundance required freedom and efficient production systems. They promoted cooperative relationships with Allied authorities, having witnessed generosity that contradicted Nazi teachings about permanent racial conflict. In factories and farms across the emerging Federal Republic, these men shared knowledge gained from American agricultural and industrial methods observed during captivity. Their credibility came from having experienced both systems directly rather than through propaganda or theoretical study. The economic miracle of the 1950s reflected lessons learned in American prison camps about industrial efficiency, worker treatment, and resource management. Former prisoners established businesses modeled on American practices, created labor relations based on cooperation rather than coercion, and promoted consumer societies that prioritized abundance over ideology. The Pepsi-Cola that had amazed prisoners in 1943 became available in German stores by 1952, symbol of how completely the relationship between former enemies had transformed through demonstration of prosperity rather than force. The legacy of American abundance, defeating Nazi ideology through generosity rather than violence, became a foundation for lasting peace between former enemies. Stories of Pepsi-Cola and ice cream served to German prisoners spread through generations, creating cultural memory that shaped European Reconstruction and Atlantic Alliance systems. Children who heard these accounts from their fathers understood that America had chosen mercy over revenge, abundance over scarcity, cooperation over domination. The transformation of Germany from totalitarian enemy to democratic ally demonstrated how soft power, through material generosity, could achieve results that military conquest alone never accomplished. Former prisoners who became business leaders, politicians, and educators carried forward lessons about democratic institutions, free markets, and human dignity learned in American camps. The simple act of sharing unlimited sugar with enemies had planted seeds for the Marshall Plan, NATO alliance, and European integration that followed. In the end, the most powerful weapon against totalitarian ideology proved to be the demonstration that free societies could provide abundance for all citizens, including former enemies, creating prosperity that lifted everyone rather than crushing opposition through force and fear.